story of the West and the Middle East. It's a story of capitalism, and it's a story of imperialism. And I just want to say a little bit about that. I mean, I'm sure many people will be familiar with it, but just to refresh our minds a little before moving on to the how question. How can we contribute here to transforming the situation and to the liberation of Palestine? One intimate connection is, of course, if imperialism, great powers stomping around the world, carving up the globe, is one ugly child of capitalism, another ugly child of capitalism is racism. And the Zionist movement, the movement for the creation of an Israeli, of a Jewish state, was a response, a particular kind of response, a minority response, to the very real question of anti-Jewish racism, anti-Semitism at the latter part of the 19th century. A modern form of racism, not the old religious tensions and worse that you had in the Middle Ages, and modern and quite shocking because people thought we had these new, modern, liberal capitalist societies like France and Britain at the time, the United States possibly after they got rid of slavery in 1865, and these old medieval superstitions will go away. In fact, they came back with a vengeance. And I just want to emphasise this point, given arguments that have been taking place, or I should say smear campaigns that have been taking place against the left in this country. This was generated on the right against the left for two reasons. One, it was to distract people, to divide and rule, growing working class, of which in countries such as Poland, Germany, France, there was a considerable Jewish working class. So to set one group of people against another, which is the way that all racism works. The second was to provide a kind of false explanation for the crimes of capitalism. It's not capitalism to blame, it's Jewish capitalism to blame. And this was done on the right in competition with the left. That's the anti-Semitism. The Zionist movement said, well, look, this shows that the anti-Semitism can't be fought. Their conclusion was not to move in an anti-capitalist direction. And so they ended up also competing with the left. And it's very important to understand that until really the disaster of the Holocaust and the years immediately after the Second World War, the idea of upping and offing from Europe and founding a Jewish state somewhere was a minority, a very small minority current amongst the Jews of Europe, which is where the majority lived. Biggest concentration was in Poland. I want to give you this quote from as late as 1938 from a man called Heinrich Ehrlich, who was a leader of what was called the Bund, the Jewish Socialist Workers Movement. Most of the Jewish urban dwellers looked to the left in one form or another. And this is in 1938. He says, if a Jewish state should arise in Palestine, its spiritual climate will be eternal fear at the enemy without, and an eternal struggle for every foot of ground, for every bit of work with the internal enemy, Palestinians who were already living in the place called Palestine. Is this a climate in which freedom, democracy and progress can grow? Is it not, indeed, a climate in which reaction and chauvinism ordinarily flourish? And that's 80 years ago, and this is the most prescient description of what's happened to the state of Israel through its exclusion of the Palestinians. Now, one reason why the state is so reactionary and why it continues to become more and more reactionary, you have these hideous creatures like Netanyahu and Lieberman, is that it was intimately connected with imperialism, not just in it was a reaction against European racism in a distorted way, but the only way that a state could be founded in Palestine where Palestinians were living was with the support of an external, big, colonizing European power.